Hey, this is Marilyn Gigliotti.
Hey, this is Brian O'Halloran.
Hey, everybody. My name is Scott Schiaffo, actor best known as the Chulies Gum Guy from the film Clerks.
And welcome to Clerks Minute.
You're listening to Clerks Minute.
And I'm not even supposed to be here today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Clerks Minute, the show where we break down the 1994 Kenneth Smith classic, one Berserker minute at a time. I'm Blake.
I'm Kyle.
And we'll be breaking down Clerks Minute number 28. But first, we have a guest on the line. Guest, why don't you tell everybody who you are?
Hey, folks, this is Scott Schiaffo, known to Kevin Smith fans as the Chulies Gum Guy from the first Clerks.
So, yeah, we actually, we did your minute earlier, which was, we should have brought you on for that, because we had a hard time getting through those minutes, because not a whole lot goes on our end, I'm not going to lie. It's funny how little goes on in those few minutes when it comes to breaking it down the way we do things. So, yeah. Those are our shortest episodes I think we've done. But, Scott, how are you doing? First of all, before we even get into things, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you. Keeping busy, and we recently had a really fun event out here in New Jersey. There was the comedy roast of Brian O'Halloran.
Yes, I heard about that. I heard about that on Tell 'em Steve Days. How did that go?
It went really well. I mean, I had a great time. Roasting's not really my thing. I'm not really a stand-up either. But, you know, I love Brian, so when they asked me, there was no way I wasn't going to do it. But, I mean, I had a really good time. There were some people who I think, you know, really embraced the actual roast thing a little better than I did. But I took a beating as well from a lot of the dais, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. Well, before we get into our minute, how did you get involved in this movie?
Well, I, like a few other folks in the film, I was an actor who just answered an audition ad. A lot of people over the years, there's a myth about Clerks where they think that mostly everybody in the film was either a friend of Kevin's or maybe a family member or somebody he went to school with. But there was a good handful of us that were strangers that didn't know Kevin, that saw the ad to come down to audition to the Playhouse in Atlantic Highlands. And I mean, I lived like an hour and a half from there, so I mean, I didn't know these guys at all personally, and I auditioned, and I was very fortunate that they liked what I did, and then they called you back to read from the script, and then the rest was history, as they say.
Wow, that's actually really cool. I know you said you were the Chulies Gum Guy. I know that's the scene that's actually kind of controversial for the original screening, for the Miramax guys. So that's actually pretty funny.
Yeah, you know, that's something I didn't really get to find out until a number of years later. I did not have the fortunate circumstance to be able to go out to Sundance when it went out to Sundance. And, you know, I heard those stories much later because back then, you know, you're talking really pre-internet, pre-cell phone. Things were pretty archaic and things were either in newspapers or clips or here and there, or, you know, the internet was still very new. So communication wasn't what it was. So I didn't find out till years later that, you know, one of the Weinsteins had taken a real exception to the whole anti-smoking rant and almost, you know, was a deal breaker for the film.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about it looking back. Hey, so let's take a look at the minute that we're actually on. And when we started playing, and I'm just going to be honest to the people listening, we're doing this a little out of order because of scheduling with guests. So when we're getting to the minute and we fast forward and we realize, oh, we're at the Berserker minutes.
Is that what we are right now?
We are at Berserker. And so we start the minute off with Jay and Silent Bob standing outside. And who's the girl they're talking to, Kyle? Did you catch the name? Was one of the girls outside, and they're introducing.
You mean the actress's name or the character's name?
Character's name. Outside with Jay and Silent Bob and Olaf.
Hold on a moment.
The character's name you're asking?
Yes.
To be honest with you, I'm not sure if they gave her a name. She might be Oh God, I thought that was a girl named Kim Longren, actress or friend of Kevin's. I could be wrong.
That didn't shock me.
I don't know if she's Berserker Girl in the credits or that's my bad.
It's all good. It's all good. I was asking Kyle too. He's looking it up too.
I'm looking here. I see Leslie Hope credited as Jay's lady friend.
I don't know. So,
is that what it is on the IMDb?
He's on the IMDb behind me. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine because that can't be anybody else, Jay's lady friend in the first film.
Yeah, he only has one. I believe you're absolutely right.
But I mean, like, I don't know if she came up to them to buy a bag of weed and then Berserker guy was just happening along. But she actually has she's a big part of that scene.
Yeah, she really makes the scene because she comes in and we find out that he really likes to pay metal. By the way, in the script she's listed as girl.
Yeah.
I have the script in front of me and it says girl.
Well,
so I think that's pretty funny.
It's best to just keep it simple.
And also, I'd like to make a note. It looks like in the script that she is combined from two different characters. Because in the script, she's two people.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of that. I think, obviously Walt Flanagan played a zillion parts.
Yeah, and Scott Moger's in the end of this, too. So
Right.
So we get to Berserker, and we were cracking up watching this back because we haven't watched this in a while ourselves. And she actually has to ask Jay if he sings in English or Russian, which made me laugh openly. I didn't. That was pretty funny.
It makes me wish that he actually sang Berserker in Russian too.
Right.
That would have been hysterical. And then he breaks into, and reading this is even more bizarre than hearing it because I have it in front of me on the screen here, and I know Kyle loves reading from the script, so you can read Olaf's part, Kyle, if you wish.
Me. My love for you is like a truck berserker. Would you like some making fuck berserker?
My love for you is like a truck berserker. Would you like some making fuck berserker?
When you hear this, you have Kevin Smith writing all over this because this makes absolutely no sense. Am I right, those guys? This makes no sense. None of this.
Well, it's hilarious, too, especially when she says, did he say making fuck?
Wait, there is more. And then Olaf breaks into the second part of this song.
My love for you is like a rock berserker. Would you like to smoke some pop berserker?
And that's we all laugh. So,
yeah.
Olaf, who actually, Kyle, you actually looked it up.
John Henry Westhead.
What can you tell us about this guy, Scott? Did you meet him? Did you know him?
Well, you actually are, you're hitting on something that there's a little bit of controversy and drama behind that guy.
Ooh.
And I guess I'll share it because it's kind of public knowledge to a lot of people who know the real details. That guy, many years later, he was not somebody who was looking to be an actor or get into the business in that sense at all. I don't know what he does do, but he had actually kind of stirred up some legal issues for Kevin because Kevin made a Berserker t-shirt with his face, and he claimed, you didn't really have the right to do that. And he got into like a weird legal thing with Kevin. And this is long after Kevin was very established with the shops, the secret stash and having merchandise. So Kevin paid him an undisclosed figure to be able to continue just making those shirts. But of course, that ended whatever goodwill or decent relationship there might have been between those guys. So that's something that's not real common knowledge, but that is knowledge within, the deeper ranks. It's not something that we can talk about. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it caused some weird legal financial stuff between Kevin and this guy. And, you'll probably never hear much about him or him involved in any kind of Kevin stuff at all since that time. But they got into a weird battle over the shirt.
Wow, I actually didn't know that story.
You can just see the tumbleweeds blowing through his IMDb page.
Yeah, and in his defense, for that, I don't think the guy ever had any aspirations to be an actor. But, he did create some financial, weird legal issues for Kevin, but they did iron out their differences, and it's the shirts continue, and this guy went on. So, and I don't know what they agreed upon, but they did, and that was that. So,
well, still, I never heard that story before, so that's pretty interesting. That is really
I'm really
interesting
glad
stuff.
I was able to share something with you that is a true story and a little bit, not necessarily all that common knowledge. And I don't feel badly like I shared something terrible, from within the realms of the View Askew universe. There's good and bad in all of filmdom.
This is true. Yeah. This is very true. So, we're back on the scene. Tell us about working for Kevin, because he had to be such a hell of a guy back in the 90s with this movie.
Well, it was a very exciting time for me in my personal life as well. And independent film was really, in its, at least that phase of independent film, because people like John Cassavetes and whatnot have been making independent film outside of the studio system, for many years. But the resurgence and the new sort of independent film movement of the late 80s, early 90s, it was becoming a thing again, and it was exciting. And back then, there weren't that many people in New Jersey shooting films. There weren't that many filmmakers because, you're talking pre-digital. It was all film cameras, and it took a real lot to actually shoot film. So if you really wanted to be involved, you had to be in New York or out in California or maybe in some of the bigger cities like Chicago. So when I saw somebody was having an audition to shoot film in New Jersey, it didn't matter to me, hour and a half, 2 hours away. I had to be there because it wasn't that common. And Kevin was a very dynamic, interesting, funny guy. I mean, I knew immediately what struck me about him was he had a really great command for language, and he had a great vocabulary. We hit it off. We had the whole excitement for independent film thing going. So it was just great. I mean, he really was just a super driven, fun guy. I didn't get to spend all that many days on the set. And then I got to be part of Vulgar a handful of years later. He wasn't really around on the set much for that either. But, I can't speak enough about how, it really was. You hear it all the time. Oh, it's wonderful working with this one and that. He's just a great guy. He really is.
Let's say, what about Mosier? What about Mosier? We have Mosier in the end of this scene.
Mosier's hilarious. Well, what I thought about Mosier after I got to know him and then watch him in the subsequent films was just what a very fine actor he really would have been or could have been had he really pursued it. Because he's dynamite whenever he shows up in any of the roles in those early films. I mean, he's not only funny, but he's really interesting to watch for a guy who wasn't necessarily looking to be an actor per se. That always blew me away about him. But in the early days, the first year of them putting the film together and then getting all the interest from Miramax, I had a very nice sort of what you would call a production friendship brewing with those guys. Even though I was 2 hours away from them, we would talk on the phone, and they were all excited when they got Miramax. Then all of a sudden they got a giant box of CDs from really well-known signed bands to choose from for the soundtrack. And it was just really exciting and really fun to be a part of all that back then. And then it's kind of like almost no looking back because the film has taken on such an amazing life of its own over, 2+ decades.
It's crazy when you think about it, because we're talking about this movie now, 23 years later. It is really crazy when you think about it from that perspective. Did you happen to see, when did you see the movie first? Did you see it at that screening that was talked about in the documentary, or how did you first see the film on a screen?
Well, the first time I saw the film was on a TV screen because Kevin had sent us all his director's first cut on VHS. Which cool. I still have, which is a prized possession of mine, and it still works, although I haven't played it in a VCR in many years. But it had the View Askew Productions logo clown on the VHS box and on the tape, And it was, the uncut where Dante dies at the end. And it was before